Hi guys, back again with another roundup video. As I'm sure you're all well aware, I'm a kind of busy guy with a full-time job, but I've got another handful of albums I really wanted to talk about to make sure these don't get lost by the wayside or overlooked by anyone. All of these albums are worth your time and they cover a great deal of ground and genres, so I'm certain there'll be a bit of something for everyone on this list. So, in alphabetical order, let's get right into it. Kicking things off, let's take a little look at the latest album from Aaron West and the Roaring Twenties. The brainchild of the Wonder Years frontman Dan Campbell, Aaron West is the titular character that the album's narrative is focused around, and In Lieu of Flowers is the third part in this ongoing story of records that started with We Don't Have Each Other in 2014 and was followed up by Routine Maintenance in 2019. It, much like what came before it, is an extremely narratively focused indie emo rock project, with some of the strongest and most fascinating lyricism that you're likely to hear this year. It's extremely grounded, distressingly relatable at times, and is supported by a backbone of reliable instrumentation that really helps to push the flow and dynamics of the story along quite nicely. Now, this record really hit a chord with me, but a lot of that does come from my familiarity with the storyline, and for me personally, it was such a treat getting to explore Aaron West's tragic story even further. Now, your mileage will vary on this one depending on how much you enjoy primarily narratively driven musical content, but even if you don't have the backing of the previous albums, this is still a pretty great place to jump in and explore what could easily become a new favourite indie emo rock project for you. US progressive black metal band Amiensis have always been one of those bands who I've passively enjoyed in the past. Their previous albums have always been those kinds of records where I, put them on, enjoy them, but never really stuck with me past the first few listens, I'll be truthful with you. Reclamation Part 1 is bucking that trend, as I have become somewhat obsessed with this album. It's ticking boxes for me that the band previously have only halfway coloured in, and this being the first of an intended two-part sequence, I'm expecting that given the context of the inevitable second half, will only make this part 1 shine even brighter in the end. But this already shines extremely brightly, managing to blend all the parts I like the most about progressive metal and black metal in equal measure. But the record is at its strongest, I think, when the progressive parts, the softer, gentler and more intimate parts are allowed into the forefront. The track Sun and Moon is absolutely phenomenal and easily one of my favourite songs of the year so far. If you're looking for some fantastic progressive black metal, check that track out, and if it seems like your kind of jam, then absolutely check out Reclamation Part 1. If you've ever wondered what ex-Nightwish singer Tarja would have sounded like if she was partially possessed by the German-speaking spirit of Lucifer himself, then look no further than Andromeda Anarchia from Folterkarma. Now, I'm not entirely convinced that this is her real name, but I am entirely convinced that she may very well have one of the most interesting, divisive, and shockingly impressive vocal performances of the year so far. Blending experimental black metal with soaring operatics and banshee-like screams on top of a bed of German-language vocals discussing powerful women and BDSM themes, Weibermacht is not an album to play in front of your aging grandparents, as this is most certainly not a gentle record. It is extraordinary in how hard this goes, how unabashed and unashamed it is both lyrically and musically. I've had an amazing time with this album, but nothing will hit you quite so hard as the first minute or so of the opening track. It's debatable as to if the novelty manages to extend across the length of the whole record, sure, but this certainly serves as an appropriately interesting and sour diversion to the sort of thing I usually listen to, and I would recommend this thoroughly to anyone who appreciates experimental and audacious music. Interarmor have long been one of my favourite sludgy, dirgy, molasses-like progressive metal bands. Paradise Gallows from 2016 remains one of my all-time favourites, and in spite of its titanic running time, it always felt like it was one of those albums that, transcended its length to feel quite short, actually, because of how well it ebbed and flowed. Their latest release, New Heaven, is far shorter, but nonetheless still carries that level of fluency and excellence in flow, managing to feel over in the blink of an eye in the best possible way. This is a Heavy album though, make no mistake. The opening track is about as crushing as it gets with this type of music, managing to make even genre heavyweights Cult of Luna look featherweight in comparison. But it still achieves an ease of listening that only truly consummate songwriters can manage in this kind of music. I'm often left breathless by the end of this album. It absolutely crushes me in the ways that I love the most from this kind of music. This isn't an album to be approached lightly. Tread with caution here, as if you're not ready for the 20 megaton weight that this music is, it will obliterate you. But if you're a fan of this kind of density, this kind of dirge-like complexity, then you'll find one of the best albums of the year in New Heaven. A little while ago, I mentioned on Twitter that sometimes a record comes along that I absolutely love, but I find it kind of hard to talk about outside of saying, record good, me likey, go listen. And in truth, I was talking about this new one from In Vain, so you'll have to excuse me whilst I pad for time a little bit here. Melodic, progressive black metal like this is such a weakness for me. It manages to blend a lot of the sounds, attitudes and ideas that I enjoy the most in modern music and serve it up in a package that's impossible to avoid for me. And In Vain's new album Solemn is precisely that kind of package. Full of incredible instrumentation, out-of-the-blue brass and vocals that run the gamut from low and bassy growls to cleans that genuinely had me believing that Ross Jennings from Haken had joined another band. Solemn is one of those albums that leaves me almost speechless by the time the final track plays out. It is an amazing record, full of twists and turns, ups and downs, and, for better or worse, has made it very hard to say much about it other than how amazing it is. It is an almost faultless example of the genre, and one that you cannot afford to miss. When you think about black metal, I'd wager that you're more likely to think about things like dirgy guitars, vomity vocals, blast beats, tremolo pick guitars for days, etc, etc. Chances are you're not likely to go to weird and wonderful keyboard sounds, are you now? Which is precisely what Labyrinthus Stellarum have done with this album. Sticking firmly within the weird sci-fi branch of the genre, Vortex of the Worlds lets you know its message right out of the gate, with a driving, off-kilter and creative keyboard section that manages to be both equal parts fascinating and unsettling. And it's this creativity and brash use of keyboards that defines this album. It manages to stand alone amongst its contemporaries as a singularly unique offering, despite the fact that it still remains at its heart a black metal album. Although it is hard to know who this record is being aimed at, as it is possibly too black metal for keyboard fans and too keyboard for black metal fans. But if you're interested in music that manages to reach outside of the boundaries that is so often put up by this genre, then you're certain to have a very interesting time with this one. Now, I love many things in the world of metal, and that's death metal and single-track albums especially. Edge of Sanity's Crimson and Light of Day, Day of Darkness by Green Carnation both track highly as some of my favourite single-song albums of all time. But man oh man is this new one from Scales Shroud nipping at their heels or what? Lyrically, the album is based on the novel The Priory of the Orange Tree by Samantha Shannon, and short of a bass solo from Leona Hayward, the entirety of the album is written and performed by one Brett Windnagel. It has everything I enjoy from this kind of music. It's heavy, it's complex, it's melodic and memorable, with so many passages and moments that have really stuck with me. There's a huge variety of sounds to be found on this album. I mean, we're singing about dragons and shit, with massive guitars and thumping bass and drums at all times. It's impossible to not smile like an idiot whilst listening to this album. It has easily, effortlessly become one of my favourite single-track albums of the 2020s. Please do go and check this one out. Windnagel seems like a really cool human and totally deserves your time and support with this fantastic album. I can remember listening to the debut album from Magic Brother and Mystic Sister and couldn't help but think to myself that it was a very promising debut that wasn't quite as fully realised a concept and idea as it could have been. But it feels like Tarot Part 1 has taken everything that I felt was missing from that and added it on top of this successful formula and then some. Steeped in mysticism and the kind of veil-shrouded, incense-burning psychedelia that is so often associated with the late 60s, Tarot Part 1 is a fantastic slice of retro-sounding prog rock that owes a lot to the more experimental side of the earliest days of the genre. There's a really exciting sense of old-school worship combined with a modern set of sensibilities and production that works together to create an album that works equally well as background chill-out music as it does complex and thought-provoking layering to make for an album that gives back as much as you put into it, and definitely puts the band on the map for me as one to keep a close eye on over the course of their blossoming career. The most recently discovered band on this list, Oak, Ash and Thorn, have blindsided me with the simplicity of their compositions, coupled with a real knack for crafting an accessible hook, for an album that's an extremely easy to enjoy listen from the first spin. Not feeling too dissimilar to the earlier mentioned In Vain, Oak, Ash and Thorn subscribe to that particular kind of melodic black metal that I enjoy so much. But the emphasis here is most assuredly on the melody, blending a far greater emphasis on the cleaner, more riff-focused side of metal, using the themes and atmospherics depicted on the cover art to accent the easily digestible tracks within. Perfectly formed, expertly structured, never outstaying its welcome, Our Grief Is Thus is one of the more immediately engaging albums released in April, giving up its goods almost immediately, making for an album that's incredibly easy to have on repeat, and never finding itself as becoming tedious or uninteresting. Absolutely give this one a go. It's not a complicated album at all, but it's certainly one of the most fun ones I've heard this year. And finally, we get to one of the more intriguing releases of April. This sophomore from Chinese band Ooh has been doing the rounds, resulting in some very mixed reception from people. It really does feel like this is very much a love it or hate it kind of experience, and I'll be honest, I'm still kind of on the fence with this one. Now, my attention was gained by the inclusion of Devin Townsend's vocal and production talents, and his fingerprints are certainly clear as day on this one to anyone who's even remotely familiar with his style and approach to music. But for all of the talent that's clear as day on the compositions and songwriting from the band, I feel that there's a few things that let it down for me as well. The repetitive nature of some of the entries on this album tend to grate on my nerves more than they appeal, with some vocal patterns and sections far outstaying their welcome and making for a soundscape that feels, drawn out and frustrating rather than enthralling and mysterious. It is kind of difficult to say who this album is really for. It's got moments of blunt force trauma heaviness, but then angular, unusual atmospherics that don't really sound like anyone else out there. And for my own ears, it's not a great blend, feeling more like oil and water than salt and sweet. But I recognise the talent involved and the fact that Ooh are not interested in sounding like anyone else. So for that, they must be commended, and I can happily say that this is the one album in April that I think everyone should try a few times at least to see if it's for them or not. As I genuinely think this will either be people's album of the year or bottom of the barrel. So, there we have it, 10 albums from April 2024 that I really wanted to find the time to talk about more, but are still worth checking out. I know there's plenty more albums from April that I could have included on this list, but I'm trying to keep these roundups to no more than 10 records, so tell me what I've missed. What's been your favourite releases from April 2024 that I've not talked about? Please let me know about yours in the comments down below. But if you have watched this far, thank you very much indeed for watching. Please do throw me a thumbs up if you like the video, and please do drop me a subscription if you've been enjoying my content. And until next time, guys, as always, keep your rhyme signatures pretty odd.